All right, so I'm going to read aloud for you Sweet Difficult Sounds by I Am Desta. So now, this is a little bit of a longer reading, as you can see. So I have a couple suggestions for you. My first suggestion and my preference would be for you to follow along with me. I will put my cursor at each new paragraph so you know where I'm at. If you do not want to follow along, another way you could stay focused would be by drawing, sketching, or doodling the elements of the story that you hear me talk about. My third suggestion would be to take a break in the middle or every few minutes if you need a break to refocus. All right, so here we go. We're going to start with this little gray box up here. I Am Desta is a writer based in Washington, D.C. In this story, a young woman immigrates to the United States and struggles to fit in at school. Skill focus. In this lesson, you'll practice analyzing theme. Analyzing theme means paying attention to topics or big ideas that come up in a text. As you read, take notes on Nathakula's fears and challenges and what she learns through her experience. And so when you do the activities that Ms. Prill or Ms. Rodriguez have for you in the document, one of them is talking about theme. So let's pay attention for the big ideas. Paragraph 1. It was the first day of school, and students swarmed the hallways like a roaming mass of book bags. Nathakula wasn't sure what to do, so she watched her new schoolmates as they slammed lockers shut, hugged each other, and handed out high fives. She turned and began to struggle with her locker combination. She didn't notice someone was beside her until she heard them speak. "Hey, I'm Ashley," said a dark-haired girl at the locker next to hers, removing her backpack from her shoulders. "You new here?" Yes, Nathakula wanted to say, but not just to Friedman High School. She was also new to the country. She had arrived in the summer from Zimbabwe. "Can you speak English?" Ashley asked. Nathakula stared at her. It wasn't that she didn't understand English. They had spoken it at school back home. And then there were the American soap operas that she loved to watch. "Are you new?" Ashley spoke loudly and slowly, like Nathakula had trouble hearing. She was still standing there staring at Nathakula as if tapping the glass of a fish tank, waiting for any reaction. It made Nathakula nervous, stiffening her tongue. With each wordless second that passed, she felt more pressure to make up for the awkwardness, say the right thing to Ashley, and ensure it came out perfectly. She opened her mouth, but not a single thing came out. Paragraph 5. Rolling her eyes, Ashley looked away, checking her face in a compact mirror and calling after one of her friends. Nathakula just stood there, like a deer in headlights. She was still deciding what to say when the homeroom bell rang. Lost in the school's big hallways, she made it to homeroom just in time. The teacher gestured for Nathakula to find a seat. She continued with roll call, but paused at Nathakula's name. "What should we call you?" she asked. Freshly intimidated by her silent exchange with Ashley, Nathakula froze again. She didn't know what to say to 40 students staring blankly at her from their seats. How best to introduce herself when she felt like an alien descending from a spaceship? "No, the Kula," she stammered out. Her classmates exchanged confused glances. She realized how funny her name must sound to them. It was in her mother's tongue, Ndebele, which they had probably never heard of. Or perhaps it was her accent. Nathakula knew she sounded nothing like the American actress she loved to watch on TV. It felt like everyone in the room was laughing at her. Then she saw a boy near the door with a wireless earbud tucked into one ear, nodding along to something only he could hear. When Nathakula locked eyes with him, he smiled at her for the longest moment. Too afraid to reciprocate, she looked away and shrank in her seat as her classmates began snickering. She didn't say another word all day. As her teachers asked questions in class, Nathakula said nothing, even when she knew the answer. So I'm going to pause right there to look at this, where it says reciprocate with a little 5 up here. Often in a text that has larger words that we might not know, we'll have a clue if we come down here at the bottom of the page and we find number 5, and look, there it is. Reciprocate means to respond to an action by doing the action in return. Okay? Paragraph 10. That evening, Nathakula thought over the humiliating scene in homeroom. She told herself that the tears sliding down her cheeks were just from the onions she was dicing for that night's dovi, a chicken and peanut stew that her mother had taught her to make back home in Zimbabwe. Nathakula lived with her Auntie Thandi, her mother's youngest sister. Auntie Thandi had been in the U.S. for 2 years and worked as a nurse in a nearby hospital. She got home late in the evenings, so Nathakula usually prepared dinner. While Auntie Thandi worked 60 hours a week in the emergency room, her niece was a quiet little mouse, helping out with cooking and household chores. Usually, making her mother's recipes soothed Nathakula, filling the kitchen and her heart with the smells of home. But that night, she felt only misery. The door opened and Auntie Thandi came in, slipping off her shoes before kissing Nathakula's cheek. "How was your first day at school?" Nathakula's eyes creased, listening to the way her auntie pronounced her words. It was like being back in Zimbabwe, listening to her teachers. Nathakula preferred it when they spoke in Ndible. "It was fine," she replied. "Did you make any friends?" Nathakula shook her head. "They look at me as if I am funny." "You are funny," Auntie Thandi replied, grinning. "Are smart inyoni." And now we're going to go down and see what that means. It means bird in Ndible. Nathakula groaned. Her parents had nicknamed her that as a child because she talked so much. She would hear a word and instantly repeat it back to them, saying it over and over again, as if she were singing. By the time she was 4, she was in love with American television and would consume common phrases as if they were pieces of fruit, eagerly repeating them back to her family. "Too cool. Yeah, right. No way." Nathakula spooned the dovi into bowls. "I want to go back home," she said. "Aye," Auntie Thandi looked at her sharply. "After just one day of school? I don't like it here." Auntie Thandi came closer. "You have to give it a try." She took the bowls from Nathakula and set them on the counter. "This is your home now. This is your chance to start anew. Besides, Zimbabwe will always be there," she said, pointing to Nathakula's chest. "You carry it with you." But as the months passed, Zimbabwe began to feel like just a name on a map. It was February, and she had barely spoken to anyone at school other than Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson was her English teacher, a calm, soft-spoken woman with a youthful style, and the only person at Friedman that Nathakula felt comfortable talking to. Because Nathakula had learned English in school in Zimbabwe, she tested out of the English classes for the kids new to the language, but Ms. Johnson arranged for them to meet up after school each Tuesday and Thursday, just in case you have some questions about this crazy new place you're in. And man, did she ever have questions. How do I figure out which city bus goes where? Why do Americans play the strange game of running into each other and call it football? That's not football. What on earth is a chicken finger? But aside from her one-on-ones with Ms. Johnson, Nathakula went through her days at Friedman's silent as a ghost. The other kids assumed she didn't know English, and Nathakula never corrected them. She felt invisible most of the time. But then there was Cole, the boy who had smiled at her on her first day at the school. Cole was tall and lanky, with deep dimples and kind eyes that reminded her of Abude. Let's look that one up. It means brother of her Abude Mofat. Even though they had never really spoken, Nathakula felt close to him for some reason. Like her, he didn't quite fit in. During lunchtime, she sometimes overheard Ashley and the other girls poking fun at him. They made jokes about his habit of stuttering. He would try to speak to Nathakula during class whenever they sat close together. Cole would speak slowly and enunciate his words, thinking she wouldn't understand him. Nathakula would cover her mouth to stop herself from giggling. Of course she understood him, but she never answered him, not even when he offered to help her with her English after school. She smiled awkwardly and shrugged her shoulders. What if my English sounds stupid to him, she thought. What if my accent is so strange that he can't understand me? At lunchtime, she sat alone with her tray as other students clustered together, swapping expressions and talking over each other. It'll be lit. Oh, she got jokes. Come through. Spill the tea, girl. Nathakula wished that her words sounded like theirs, flowing so freely without even having to think about it. Ashley sat nearby, surrounded by her friends. They complained about many things: boys, their teachers, parents, adding the word like to almost every statement. He was like, she was like, I was like what? Nathakula wondered. One of the girls looked up and saw that Nathakula was watching them. Nathakula picked up her sandwich and returned to the book she was reading. She glanced up again to see the girl was gesturing for her to join them. At that moment, Ashley looked over and shook her head. She's from Africa, Cynthia. She doesn't understand you, Ashley said. Nathakula bristled and whispered under her breath, I'm from Zimbabwe and I understand you perfectly. That evening, she went home and planned what she would say to Cole the next time she got a chance. She wrote it down in her notebook so that she could memorize it. Each version of what she thought she might say started with, Hey Cole, you're too cool. Then she would ask him what kind of music he liked and tell him about how everyone in Zimbabwe learns English. She used the word like a lot, like Ashley did, and try her best to sound American. The next morning, she waited and waited for the right moment to speak to Cole. There were too many people around during gym class, and Ms. Lavelle didn't allow any English at all in her French class. By the time she stood in line in the cafeteria waiting for chicken fingers, Nathakula was ready to give up. Just then, a voice behind her asked, So what's the special today? Turning, Nathakula saw Cole smiling at her. As always, he had one earbud in, and his kind eyes looked directly into hers. This was her chance. She flashed him a smile and thought about her reply. He'd asked a question, so replying to it with what she had rehearsed, Hey Cole, you're too cool, would just sound stupid. Despite all her preparation, the clever, American-sounding speeches she had written in her notebook flew right out of her brain. There she was again, her mouth open, her brain frozen. Ashley was at the register and decided to chime in, answering for Nathakula before she had a chance to say something. Tater tots, freak. All the students within earshot started laughing and pointing in Cole's direction. Dropping his eyes, Cole plugged his dangling earbud into his ear and turned up the volume on his phone. He slid out of line and disappeared into the crowd.